Neo Geo Pocket was SNK's response to the undeniably popular and constantly growing Nintendo Game Boy fan base. Many had tried to dethrone Game Boy, some with minor successes, while others just failed completely. Even with the Game Boy's hardware getting older, it was still able to outsell more advanced hardware due to its huge library of hit titles. The Neo Geo Pocket at first was fairly similar to the Game Boy, in the sense it too originally used a monochromatic screen and only had two main fire buttons. One difference was that the unit had a mechanical thumbstick rather than a directional crossbar. While the unit's graphics were similar to later generation Game Boy titles, it was capable of doing more advanced animations than Nintendo's Game Boy. Later, the system would see an upgrade of color with the Neo Geo Pocket Color system, which much like the Game Boy was also released in a variety of console colors. While SNK had its own popular titles, they knew that in order to succeed, it needed to have an edge over the Game Boy other than just being a more technologically advanced system. Instead of simply porting its library of Neo Geo titles over to the new handheld, the company would release original titles as well as spin-offs of its more popular Neo Geo titles, such as SNK vs. Capcom, Match of the Millennium, Metal Slug First and Second Mission, and Fatal Fury First Contact. While the games for the system were for the most part good, the system never quite caught on, which is a shame as the unit was very entertaining. Because of poor sales, SNK began cutting their overstock of games and removing the cartridges in order to release them in blister multi-packs. Because of this, it's more difficult to find these games complete in box. As the years went by, SNK would see its shares of ups and downs. While the Neo Geo was a success in the arcades, the AES unit never became truly mainstream. It never quite became a major contender in the 16-bit wars, and its aging hardware would eventually be totally overshadowed by the new 32-bit and 64-bit systems of the late 1990s. With sales of both the Neo Geo and Neo Geo Pocket games continuing to fall, SNK would finally have to close its doors in 2000. The company was then purchased by Aruze, a company known for its pachinko machines who use some of SNK's properties in their own machines. It was during this time period when Capcom vs. SNK was released. The game was highly successful, however most of the game's profits would go to Capcom. Due to the lack of revenue, the original SNK company would be forced to file for bankruptcy in 2001. Seeing the value in the SNK brand name and its properties, Playmore, a company started by the original creator of SNK, Ikichi Kawasaki, would purchase the rights to the company and its holdings. Playmore would then change its name to SNK Playmore. Neo Geo collecting can get fairly expensive. Complete AES games go for prices anywhere from $30 to $3,000. Even though the arcade MVS games were actually more expensive at the time of their initial release, in general, MVS carts are drastically less expensive now. This is due to the fact that more MVS carts were produced than AES carts. The arcade MVS unit was pretty popular and widespread. Rarely would you go to an arcade and not see one. However, the AES market was fairly niche. As stated before, not many people were able to afford an AES, nor the games. Because of this, the number of AES carts produced was fairly low. For an example of the price difference between the MVS and AES version of a game, we'll take a look at Metal Slug. Metal Slug was a fairly popular title on the MVS. However, the quantity made for the AES unit was rather low. A complete Metal Slug MVS kit can go for approximately $70, while a complete AES version goes for approximately $2,000. AES games were released in what are called shock boxes. These are plastic cases that the carts would be stored in. These were similar to the boxes that old Disney VHS tapes would be packaged in, except much bigger. For the most part, you would receive an insert in the case, a graphic label on the cart, as well as a manual. MVS carts were released in kits. These kits contained the cartridge in a plain brown box with the name of the game printed on the spine of the box. This label would also have a printed serial number on it that matches the serial number printed on the spine of the cart. Other than the spine label, there is no other way to identify the game from the cartridge. Also included in the kit would be mini marquees for the games that were placed in the marquee display of the arcade machine. An instruction card and other promotional materials were also included. Since the hardware in the AES and MVS units is nearly identical, one could technically play MVS carts on their AES unit with the use of the Super MVS Converter 2 adapter. This opens up a cheaper option to Neo Geo collectors to expand their collection. The Neo Geo will always be remembered as an innovative and groundbreaking piece of hardware. While SNK is no longer a hardware manufacturer, they continue to move forward with sequels to their classic games in the arcade with such titles as The King of Fighters 12, a game that is true to the SNK brand as every frame of animation in the game is hand-drawn and looks awesome. The company has also attempted to delve into the 3D realm recently with games such as Metal Slug 3D for the PS2 and the multi-platform release King of Fighters Maximum Impact, both of which have received mixed reviews. Knowing their fans are die-hard 2D gamers, the company continued to release 2D games on various present-day platforms, like the arcade game King of Fighters 11 for the PS2 and Metal Slug 7 for the Nintendo DS. Not to forget their original Neo Geo titles, the company has also released a variety of compilation discs, both on the PlayStation 2, the Nintendo Wii, and even some standalone titles on the Virtual Console, Xbox Live, and GameTap. These collections and downloads are perfect for anyone wanting to replay these games or even try them out for the first time, as they are near-perfect ports and don't carry the hefty price tag of those original cartridges. While the company never quite saw the success or recognition as companies like Sega, Nintendo, or even Sony, there is no denying the company's impact and marks on the history of video games. With the company still producing and releasing games, gamers can look forward to even more great accomplishments by SNK.